Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Sorry to make you wait. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Okay. All right. Fine. Excellent. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to copy and paste here the link. Right, there's more people coming in. There you go. So I'm going to copy and I just pasted. There you go. Pasted into the chat the link for the piece of the Talmud that we are about to study, but I'm also going to share my screen for everyone, if you can't open it up, and for everyone to be able to see the piece of the Talmud that we are studying. Just to remind you that since today is Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day in which we mourn many, many tragedies during Jewish history, particularly the destruction of both temples of Jerusalem. So instead of focusing on the Tanya today, and as is suggested by the Talmud, because the Torah brings joy to a person's life. It's a verse in the book of Psalms that says, Pikudei Hashem misharim mesamechei lev, Torat Hashem temima mishivat nafesh. The Torah soothes the soul, and the commandments of God bring joy to the heart. So in order to minimize the joy of this day, we study the parts of the Torah that don't bring joy. And those are the parts that deal with the destruction of the temple, particularly of the second temple, that happened during this day. So what I want to do is share my screen, as mentioned, or you can follow the link that I added to the chat. And we can focus on one passage from the Talmud that comes from the Tractate of Gittin, which suggests maybe the core reason, there we go, the core reason of why the temple was destroyed. There are other reasons suggested, but I want to focus on this famous story to try and analyze it, and then maybe we'll go a little bit more. Everyone, by the way, is welcome to CBT this morning. Immediately after the prayer at about 8:45, 9 o'clock, we'll also be exploring some of these passages too. So you're more than welcome to join us then. But for now, let's focus here on the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, number 17 right here. Does anyone want to read? The Gemara explains. Anyone?
I'll
Go for it.
You want me to read?
Yes, please.
Okay.
By the way, just FYI, we're still learning Rabbi Steinsaltz here because this is a website called safari.org, and they've transcribed the entire Talmud in online, but they chose the Talmud of Rabbi Steinsaltz, which is the Talmud to choose, of course. He's the trailblazer in this field. And the bold letters are the words of the Talmud itself. The non-bold letters are the words of Rabbi Steinsaltz trying to just sew the words together, so to speak. So go for it. Go ahead.
Okay. The Gemara explains, Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. This is as there was a certain man whose friend was named Kamsa and whose enemy was named Bar Kamsa. He once made a large feast and said to his servant, "Go, bring me my friend Kamsa." The servant went and mistakenly brought him his enemy Bar Kamsa.
Right. I guess he was hard of hearing or who knows what. But he brought him his enemy in Bar Kamsa instead of his friend Kamsa. So yeah, his enemy now comes to the feast. Let's go.
Okay. The man who was hosting the feast came and found Bar Kamsa sitting at the feast. The host said to Bar Kamsa, "That man is the enemy, Baal Devava, of that man. That is, you are my enemy. What then do you want here? Arise and leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "Since I have already come, let me stay, and I will give you money for whatever I eat and drink. Just do not embarrass me by sending me out."
Okay.
The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for half of the feast. Just do not send me away." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa then said to him, "I will give you money for the entire feast. Just let me stay." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Finally, the host took Bar Kamsa by his hand, stood him up, and took him out. After having been cast out from the feast, Bar Kamsa said to himself, "Since the sages were sitting there and did not protest the actions of the host, although they saw how he humiliated me, learned from it that they were content with what he did. I will therefore go and inform Ikul Kurtza against them to the king." He went and said to the emperor, The Jews have rebelled against you. The emperor said to him, who says that this is the case? Bar Kamsa said to him, go and test them. Send them an offering to be brought in honor of the government and see whether they will sacrifice it.
Right.
Can we stop before we go anymore? And
Yeah, we
just
can stop. Yeah, is everyone following the flow though?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Kamsa was kicked out even though he offered to pay for the entire meal. He was kicked out and humiliated. So now the Bar Kamsa,
I think you're skipping the beginning.
well, yeah, we read the
I
beginning.
think well, I know we read the beginning, but I think the beginning needs to be explained.
Yeah. We're going to go back to the beginning. I just want to finish the story. We explained the beginning, now we're explaining the end, and now we're explaining this part. So what Bar Kamsa does is that he's so humiliated and he wants revenge. So he goes to the Romans and he says to them, the Jews have rebelled against you. Why the Jews? Why not take revenge just on the host, whoever he is? No one knows his name. And the answer is because he felt that the Jews, the Jewish people's leaders, the Jews, therefore, were guilty. They didn't say anything. The sages were there and they allowed for this to happen. So he wanted to take revenge on the Jewish people. So he says to the emperor of the Romans, the Jews have rebelled against you. And the emperor, of course, is not going to believe him immediately. So he says, look, try it out. You'll see that they are rebellious people. Bring a sacrifice. And you'll see that they'll refuse your sacrifice because they can't stand you. They're rebelling against you. So let's just see what happens, and then we'll analyze every part of the story.
Okay.
The emperor went.
The emperor went and sent with him a choice 3-year-old calf. While Bar Kamsa was coming with the calf to the temple, he made a blemish on the calf's upper lip. And some say he made the blemish on its eyelids, a place where, according to us, halakha, it is a blemish, but according to them, Gentile rules for their offering. It is not a blemish. Therefore, where Bar Kamsa brought the animal to the temple, the priest would not sacrifice it on the altar since it was blemished, but they could also not explain this satisfactorily to the Gentile authorities who did not consider it to be blemished.
Right, so Bar Kamsa played a trick on the Roman emperor. What he did is that he made a blemish on the animal, a blemish that's considered to be a blemish by the Jews, but not by the non-Jews. Now the Jews couldn't offer it. But they couldn't say to the emperor that we can't offer it because it has a blemish, because for the emperor, it wasn't considered a blemish. So now the emperor could start thinking, oh, maybe they're not offering the sacrifice, not because there's a blemish, because I don't consider it a blemish, but because they're rebelling. So let's continue.
Okay, the blemish notwithstanding, the sages thought to sacrifice the animal as an offering due to the imperative to maintain peace with the government. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkola said to them, if the priests do that, people will say that blemished animals may be sacrificed as offerings on the altar. The sages said, if we do not sacrifice it, then we must prevent Bar Kamsa from reporting this to the emperor. The sages thought to kill him so that he would not go and speak against them. Rabbi Zechariah said to them, if you kill him, people will say, people will say to them, if you kill him, people will say that one who makes a blemish on sacrificial animals is to be killed. As a result, they did nothing. Bar Kamsa's slander was accepted by the authorities, and consequently, the war between the Jews and the Romans began.
Right. So what happened is that Rabbi Zechariah, who I guess was one of the heads of the sacrifices there, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos, he says, well, we can't accept the sacrifice because if we accept the sacrifice, everyone's going to think that a blemished animal can be sacrificed.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't think twice. He didn't look at the big picture, but that's what he was thinking. Then they said, okay, fine. So now how are we going to stop Bar Kamsa from going back to the Romans and saying that they did not accept their sacrifice? Because if that's what he reports to them, they are going to think that we are rebelling against them and they're going to launch a war against us. So they said, maybe we should kill Bar Kamsa. They said, no. Rabbi Zechariah says, no. Why? Because he brought a blemished animal. Everyone's going to think that if you bring a blemished animal, you're going to be killed. So we can't do that. So Rabbi Yochanan concludes the story, and then we'll go back to the beginning and analyze it. But this is Rabbi Yochanan's conclusion of the story. Go for it.
Rabbi Yochanan says, the excessive humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos destroyed our temple, burned our sanctuary, and exiled us from our land.
Okay. So the excessive humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos destroyed our temple. Instead of looking at the big picture, instead of thinking or playing chess in his mind, well, what if I do this? Will it create this? That excessive humility is what brought about the destruction of the temple. Now, fine, we can blame it on Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos, But there's a story here. Let's go back to the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, or the story of the host refusing to allow Bar Kamsa, his enemy, to stay at his party because the enemy thought he was invited, and obviously he was not. The emissary of the host made a mistake, and instead of inviting Kamsa, invited Bar Kamsa. So because he kicked him out and humiliated him, maybe that's the reason for which the destruction occurred. But that's the story. Now, there are many, many ways we can approach the story, and I want to hear your mind this morning. But I think at the core of the story, what the Talmud is trying to convey is that that hatred that existed during, that baseless hatred maybe even, that existed during those times. And when you have hatred, then you have destruction. There's hatred between the host and Bar Kamsa, who refused to allow him to stay. I understand you don't like the guy, but you hate him so much that you're willing to do everything, including humiliating him in front of everyone. That's how far your hatred goes. That's how destructive it is. So what the Gemara, I think, is trying to convey through the story is that there's this hatred that is unacceptable, that caused not just division, but caused the eventual destruction of the temple, the destruction of the Jewish people, and their exile. Now, it's not just a hatred, but there's another side to it. And as Albert Einstein famously said, evil prevails. I don't think I'm quoting verbatim, but evil prevails not because of evil people, but because of good people remaining silent and allowing it to happen. And here we have also a group of good people, sages after all, sitting at this party and not saying a word. Here's Bar Kamsa being humiliated and kicked out like a dog. And they're not saying anything. They're not standing up and saying, "Oh, stop." That is another aspect of it. So maybe there was hatred in the times of the temple, but there was also silence allowing hatred to happen, which is yet another lesson that we ought to learn from this. That yes, there's evil in this world, but we have to stand up for it or against it and not allow it to happen. So that's another aspect of the story. And then again, and then the third aspect of the story, I've always been intrigued, and we can go on, we can add a fourth aspect, a fifth aspect, but again, I want to hear your minds, and that's what study is all about. But I've always been intrigued. I don't know if people pay attention to this, but the opening line, the introductory note to the story is that Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. That's false. Jerusalem was destroyed on account of the host and Bar Kamsa. What does Kamsa have to do with it? Kamsa was the guy's best friend. Kamsa was the guy that was not invited to the party. Kamsa wasn't even there.
He has everything to do with it.
Kamsa wasn't even at
He
the
has
party.
everything to do with it. Because if he's his best friend, he wasn't a very good friend, because he would not have allowed his good friend to be that way and to be his good friend.
But he wasn't at the party.
You know
He
that.
wasn't at the party. He wasn't there. He wasn't there.
It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference
You
at
didn't
all.
know about it.
If they are friends, they're responsible for it. If they're good friends, they're good friends for a reason, because they believe in the same things.
Yeah, but it's not like they had phones or emails at the time, right? You couldn't text your friend, "Hey, look at who came to my party." This was who knows where he lived.
Well,
He lived in the city.
I'm just telling you, that's my thought.
Okay,
That's all.
I understand. Well,
Rabbi,
yes,
I would have a couple of comments to make.
yes, yeah. Let me just finish this thought, and then this third aspect, and then we'll open this up. So Kamsa is included in the introductory note, even though again he wasn't even at the party. No one knows where he was. He may have lived in a different city, miles and miles away. He was completely maybe oblivious to what had happened. But I think that there's another aspect to it, and that is that if you are truly a friend, as Kamsa is described here to the host, then you participate in your friend's joy and you pain their pain. That's what a friend is. If Kamsa wasn't there at the party, it means he wasn't a real friend. And that means that friendship also did not exist during the times of the temple, or very rarely maybe. And that type of friendship is not a friendship we ought to seek. That type of friendship is a friendship that can indirectly bring about the destruction of Jerusalem too. when you truly engaged with someone else, involved with someone else, then you participate in their joy and you pain their pain, and you're always there for them. The fact that Kamsa wasn't there for his friend, that means that he's indirectly responsible also for the destruction of Jerusalem, because his friendship was a fake friendship. Anyhow, those are the three big ideas.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
But I think this is also a truism. I totally agree with everything you've said. But if it wasn't for Kamsa and Kamsa, if they were out of the picture, it's going to happen. It would eventually happen anyway. It's just because who those human beings were. And sooner or later, they would come to clash.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi, I just want to make a couple of comments.
Please.
There's a reason why the rabbis of the Talmud wrote this story in this certain way, because they want to teach us a moral lesson. The real politics was that the Romans destroyed the temple because there was a rebellion against their authority. That is the fact. But the rabbis are writing this story because they want to teach us about baseless hatred.
Right.
How relevant this was in the destruction of the temple, that's irrelevant. This is a story that they want to teach us a lesson. We know that when Vespasian had surrounded Jerusalem, the zealots burned their food storages. They also—
That, by the way, comes afterwards. That's part of the story they tell.
Okay,
Yeah.
they also— well, those are factual things, and that Vespasian was actually sitting back and waiting for the opportunity after the Jews would be fighting with each other. So that's the reality of what happened. And this is a story that the rabbis are— how relevant it is to the destruction of the temple, that's not really relevant, but they want to teach us moral lessons.
Right, which is exactly what we ought to do, learn from everything in life. And this is yet another lesson to learn from the destruction of the temple. But don't get the rabbis wrong. If you fast forward, they speak about these storages that were burnt. They speak about Vespasian. They speak about everything else that happened during these times. Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Eisen, do you want to say something? William, I'm sorry. Do you want to say anything further?
No, that's all for now.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for that. Okay, Rabbi Eisen, please.
Well, I've always had some concerns about the story. First of all, is Bar Kamsa a victim or a villain? In some ways, he's the victim, but I also wonder why the name. And I think when that question is asked, the story takes on a little bit different tone. Usually, when the rabbis are discussing some kind of ephemeral machloket, they're going to say Reuven and Shimon. Or they use Ploni, like John Doe. So why here are they using Kamsa? Why did they come up with this name? Kamsa is not found any other place as a name or a fellow. Mm-hmm. You go to the, what is it? And it could be a locust. Okay, that's one of the ways of translating. It means to separate or grab, as you know. And as part of the sacrifices of the mincha, for the minchas that were offered, that were eaten, also the priest took a kmitza, right, a little handful of the solet, of the flour, and threw it on the altar. So I think there's some kind of reference here to that in the rabbis. I really do. I think this is written for the rabbis and not for the people. And it's really I think it's tongue in cheek, or even kilach yad, when it's in a backhanded way, when it says the humility or the tolerance of this rabbi, who we don't even know if he was at the party and saw the whole thing, or he's just coming in at the end. I think that's kilach yad, a backhanded way of saying, not because of his humility, but because of his hubris. Mm. And the reason I say it is there's a parallel. This is found parallel in Lamentations, Rabbah. And when you said you were going to do it, I didn't know which version we're going to do. I figured this would be it. But
okay, go for
it. But I looked up the passage in Lamentations, Rabbah, and there's an interesting ending to the story that doesn't appear in the Gemara. In Lamentations Rabbah, at least in the Buber edition, it didn't look at the Margulies edition. In the Buber edition, it says, Davar Acher. Okay, there's one more little thing here that has to be looked at. And it's translated as, not one of them begat a child who was defective in limb or blemished in body. What does that mean? So you go back to the text, and it says, Davar Acher b'nei Sion hayikarim. So the children of Israel, you might say, that the people that actually lived there, the precious ones, so as Mahaya Karutan, what was their preciousness? No one went out missing anything. So even though this is all happening with the rabbis and the hubris of the rabbis and their leadership, right? They're offering the sacrifices, this and that. Well, they aren't, but the priests are. I mean, they see themselves maybe as the spiritual priests, if not the temple priests. They're making this mess, but the people themselves are going on. Everything's fine. In fact, God's going to compensate them for the hubris of their leaders. And I think there's another story here that underlies the story. That when, this, who's this written for? It's written for the Beit HaMidrash, so the Chaverim, right? The Pharisees, they're reading this and hopefully getting a kick in the pants about how they should relate with each other and with the people. But if the people tend to read it, Lamentations Rabbah, which is probably closer to the people than the Gemara, there's this little, we call Sakdologer at the end. It comes out and says, but wait a minute, you know what? Yes, this is going on. Yes, this is happening, but God cares for you. So there's a certain amount of comfort, even in the midst of all the angst. And we miss that. We miss that. Yes, there are consequences of decisions we make, but there are other kinds of things out there that are hopefully helping us get through this. And I think that's often missed when we read this story, especially on Tisha B'Av, except for the Midrash which says that on Tisha B'Av the Messiah will be born. In the depths of darkness, there's still reason to hope. And I think maybe if you read Lamentations Rabbah, you find that little push, you might say, as well.
Beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
I have a question for Rabbi Eisen.
Yeah.
When you said, and God will care for you, what does that mean?
That, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. Forget about, if you lead us.
What will he take? What will he take care of?
Well, he's there for you. He's there. What? So God is there.
So what does that mean to me? God is here. If God is here with me, what does that mean to me? How does it make me feel? How does it change me?
Well, according to the text, it says that the people weren't missing anything. They had what they needed. And God was there to provide for them in spite of or against these efforts, or the bad efforts of the rabbis and the bad examples they're setting. When you get to people as it's lived, as we live, there's reason to find hope, reason to find comfort. People have said,
reason to find hope and comfort in what?
In each other and in life itself.
That's the important thing, I think.
But there's still room for hope. There's reason to stay alive. I mean, how many people would have, this was a 9/11. How many people would have jumped off those walls?
Yeah.
Saying, no, wait. God's there to help you, to protect you, to be with you. Yeah, you're going to suffer because of this.
What? Wait. Stop there too. What is the you? What is the you? Is it the you? Is it the you that's the animal soul, or the you that's the God soul?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both, right? Both. The entire you, right, Rabbi Eisen? But I just want to go back. I love the idea that the name is not a real name. The name itself here of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa is trying to teach us something. Kamsa in Hebrew also means stingy, right? And maybe it's not just the stinginess of action, but the stinginess of thought that they exhibited. These Bar Kamsa and the host exhibited. That instead of having this what's called in Kabbalistic languages, mochin de gadlut, a grand mind, a big mind, a mind that thinks big. They were stingy in their thought. They were very narrow-minded. Maybe that's what caused them also to behave in such ways. The Bar Kamsa himself, well, the host, let's start with the host, saying, well, get out, I hate you, that's all I can think of, that's all I can see. Instead of looking at the bigger picture, 1 second, I'm humiliating him, we're in a party here. Maybe there's some parts of him that should be liked. Maybe I should, maybe this is a sign from God that I should repair my relationship with him. But he was stuck in that thought process. And also the rabbis themselves were stuck in that thought process. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos was stuck in the thought process. It's a blemished animal. No, we can't accept it. So there was a lot of kamsa there exhibited, a lot of stinginess of mind.
A thought just came to me
idea.
was, could Bar Kamsa have been the son of Kamsa? Ben Kamsa? Is that possible?
It's a good question. I mean, you could certainly offer that interpretation, because you're right, Bar means the son of. So it could be they were related. It could be it was father and mother and father and son.
Tricking.
There's a great poem. I think Bialik wrote it, and the cobwebs are everything up. But in response to one of the pogroms, he has the people coming to the rabbis and saying, "My wife was violated by the Kasa. Can I still approach her? Can she still be my wife? And what's the halakha of that?" And he mocks. It's sort of, I don't know whether he mocks them or it's just just beside himself. And if this is where they're going, this is what they're thinking about. You go hug your wife and comfort her, and say, we'll get through this. And the same thing here when they talk about the humility or tolerance of the rabbi, the halakhic decision. Do you go this way? Do you go that way? What do people think about this? Think about that? You know what? There's more at stake here. What's the bigger picture?
Right.
And another question is, so what are we, so what? What are we supposed to take away from this? Especially when we read it on teachable. What's the takeaway?
Right. So, right. Great question. And I think that,
Can I make a comment on that, please?
Yes, go for it, Ronnie.
That when I think it's important that we need to understand we do have an animal soul, we do have a godly soul. They are two different things, and they both need comforting and they both need to be taken care of. Now, the question is, after that violation was done, which one of those souls needs the comforting? And it's the animal soul that needs that comforting at that time. It's so important. And I just want to make that comment.
Thank you.
So which soul is driving the rabbi who says, Zechariah, who's going through these halakhic?
It could go either way. Which way you want to choose, you choose.
Right. Okay. So what's the takeaway as we conclude this class? What's the takeaway, which is the question? Thank you, Rabbi Eisen, for posing it. Look, the clear takeaway is the idea that baseless hatred can destroy society. The other takeaway is that narrow-mindedness can destroy societies too.
And I think.
One second, let me just finish. Narrow-mindedness can destroy societies, and not being able to think big, like Zechariah ben Avkulos wasn't thinking big, or like the host of Bar Kamsa wasn't thinking big. The third takeaway, let me just add that, and then Ronnie, I'm happy to hear your thought too. The third takeaway is that I think that, again, going back to Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the reason why Kamsa is not involved is that, what does it mean? If we are against baseless hatred, so then what does it mean to have baseless love? And what it means to have baseless love is that I'm so involved, and I know it could be emotionally draining, and I know it could take a lot from a person. But if I am really connected to someone else, if I really love someone else, then I have to be there with him emotionally too, and I have to even with my entire being. I have to feel his pain, like I said, or feel his joy, participate in his party. And that's the level of friendship that baseless love requires, and that will eventually rebuild our society and rebuild the temple. But it's not enough just to say hello on Facebook and once a year to see the person and smile at them. If you're really his friends, then you are completely engaged. And that, I think, is the third takeaway that this story presents.